Sorry, I thought you were referring to me being terrifying, and I was like, okay.
You just got here. It's like, no.
Nope.
Well, goodbye, guys. Sorry, I stopped work early for you, but that's fine. Bye.
Welcome, everyone, to another book club. This time we have August and September put together because we were all living very busy lives and did not have time to finish the September or August book in time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over our September read first because that was Lifeline and it was shorter. And then the rest of the chat can be all Night Circus, which will be Elly's side of it.
We're already dressed up for it, so
yeah. We are dressed as the reviewers and I'm very excited. Did you guys play through it? I know Emily did, for sure. Yeah? Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I did.
Had anyone played it before besides Elly and me?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Good.
Nope.
That means we have sound expectations. Okay. So the first question I want to get into is, did you read Taylor with a specific gender in mind?
Yes. And it wasn't on purpose. It just kind of happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I didn't think about it until I was talking to Beth like a week later and I was like, wait, no, there's like no specific pronouns mentioned whatsoever. And I was like, well, whoops.
All right. Raise your hand if it was female from initial reading. Male? All right. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I will say this, the second time round, I did think of them as more non-binary, only because of the fact that I didn't know the pronouns, so I was just kind of like, it doesn't really matter. I'm just referring to them as them now.
Yep. Progressive approach.
Yeah. And I noticed a lot of the reviews you refer to them as they, them as well.
Yeah. Mm. Do you have a specific reasoning behind your chosen gender, or was it just like, oh, that's what it is now?
More the latter, yeah. I didn't really have any reasoning. It just kind of happened and went, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it was like the voice that I was reading it in just automatically went male, and therefore that's what he was.
I think for me, whenever, like, especially when we first met, so for me it was a her, like when I was reading it and she was kind of like having a bit of a spiral about kind of breaking down, the way that she thought for me was very, like, obviously there's no indications of it, but it was very feminine and it was very like over analytical and like almost cynical, but like kind of with that splash of humor. And I don't know, that could be male, I guess, as well, but like I read it as very feminine.
I think that's what it, because I think I heard him as like him as like that kind of nerdy space, like kind of what's
I
the
get
Martian.
I just remember, Bethany, when you got up to her talking about coffee, you were like, this is a female.
I did say that.
Elly, how did you feel reading with the second time round with non-specific gender in mind? Did it change anything? Did it feel easier?
I don't actually think it did. I think I specifically tried to think of them as non-binary, and so that's just kind of how, or rather I just, not necessarily non-binary, but just the gender didn't matter to me. I think because the content was still the same, I didn't really change anything, honestly. It is very interesting that from different readings, it can change. Like you can change your perspective to make it something different. Yeah,
for sure. I think for me, the reason it read more feminine is because it is very close to my writing and Elly's writing. Especially dialogue-wise, it was so close that was my initial instinct was like, this is female, because I'm so used to that kind of voice.
Well, I think that's very interesting pairing these two stories together, because Ashley did mention to me earlier today that both texts actually reminded her of my writing style, and I read both of these around the same time several years ago, and I'm just thinking, like, did that impact me in terms of how I was writing? Like, what happened?
I know that I often do tend to mimic, like if I'm reading something, I tend to start mimicking it a little bit in my writing, and then I read something completely different, and then my writing changes, which can be a problem.
No, you're just versatile.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Put that on your resume.
Yeah.
Most important question is, did Taylor make it out alive? On
No.
your first turn?
Eventually.
Yeah. My first turn round was a big no. And then I had to look up a walkthrough because I was like, I don't know what I've done wrong.
Well, it's very interesting because, like, hang on, did you guys manage to make her live at all, or was it just you gave up and you couldn't help anymore?
No,
The latter.
they got rescued.
No,
Oh.
she died. She actually died in my like ending.
So
Aw.
the thing is with the ending though is that you're supposed to hang on. I kept it up just in case I needed to refer to it, and I did. So regardless of whether she dies or not, you get like this connection terminated. Then you got this bit.
Yeah.
With like I can send you emails and things like that.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, great marketing technique.
Yeah. I didn't see what they were doing until it was too late. I was like, hey, hang on.
It's very clever. I really like that. I think I made her die the first time around, and then, oh my gosh, I'm referring to her as female. That's interesting. Okay. Moving on. That's right. The second time around, I managed to do it. I managed to do it without the walkthrough, but it gets to this point where you're so certain that they're going to die. You're so certain because they're like being overcome. They're being overtaken by this thought process, and then you literally have to snap them out of it. So I'm interested to see, like, did anybody get to that point, or am I just talking out of my ass here?
No, that's the part that I struggled at the first time.
So just because I managed to knock them out of it, I managed to actually get them through. That was not the point that I died. I think I ended up dying in the shipwreck in the crater. That's where I ended up going.
I made them fall off a cliff at one point.
Oh. Oh, wait, was that into the crater?
No, it was a slightly different route, and you could go straight, and there was a cliff face, and she was like, they were like complaining how steep it was, and I was like, don't worry about it, it's fine.
It's fine. Just keep going.
I'm not in your shoes, but suck it up.
No, mine, she took her death into her own hands. So
you got really
we were
mad at that.
in the peak. So that's the route I went to, where we went to this peak, and all like the little aliens become her rats, and like her crewmates were the aliens, and she kind of was spiraling and then doing the whole like, no, I'm gonna be part of them, that's meant to be, and I'm like, no, it's not. You haven't come this far for me to just like, no, just stop. And so she ended up deciding she also had to try and save the rescue ship. She didn't want them to get murdered by the aliens. So she ended up like overriding the system and blowing up the peak. And so like killing all of the aliens and herself in the process.
So the way that you can actually...
I did that one too.
I think with that one, there is actually a specific way, like very, very specific choices. Like I think out of that, there's only one out of 14 endings like that you can choose to go through, and they will die every time except for once. That is the one that I went through. So I managed to make them survive through doing specific choices.
I did not find that option.
We'll play it again.
Yeah.
Em and Ash can actually verify. Friday night last week? Was it Friday night last week? Anyway, we were playing, it was on my phone, and I was so obsessed with the game. I was like, sorry guys, I have to stop talking, Taylor's on the phone.
Yeah.
And I was playing. And I kept being like, oh no, she died. So then like go back and replay it throughout the night. And we were up like till very, very late at night. This was a cast party for the show.
It was like 2 a.m. and you were like, Taylor's messaged back, yes. I was like, okay.
I was like, sorry guys.
Oh man.
Taylor,
I had the realization like halfway through, I was like, wow, I've made Taylor make a lot of bad decisions and their life's absolutely in my hands. And they're like, should I go around a cradle, go across it? And I'm like, you haven't eaten anything but rat pellets in 2 days, but go on, go for a stroll.
Yeah.
And there's one point where like, yeah. Like sprains his ankle. He's like, look, I'm going to be swearing for like a long time. So I'm just going to like message you later. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. I've put you through this.
Valid.
This is my fault. I'm sorry, but go on.
Yeah, I was one of those people who at the second shipwreck, when they're like, oh, if this was a horror movie, I'd be telling myself not to go down here. And I'm like, keep going.
Oh, yeah.
I am the captain now.
I think that was one of the other reasons why I thought he was a male in my mind, because he was very self-deprecating and a bit not narcissistic, but like, yeah, I kind of related to him a lot in like a lot of the way his thought processes worked through that, and I was like, yeah, I'm with you, buddy. We'll die on this together. And then, yeah.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Which is going to move on to our next part, the way they format the game, and no matter what gender you see it as, or if you see it as no gender at all, you still care about them a lot because you feel like you've gone through this really traumatizing experience, but you're not. It's just text on a screen. But they also play into the feeling we get when we get notifications on our phone. And I love that they played into that, because then like they'll be like, oh, I'll just be a couple hours. And you're like, okay, I can wait a couple hours. And then it comes up and you're like, okay.
Yes, Taylor.
So in terms of
Is Taylor your boyfriend?
Taylor is waiting. How did you guys like the format of this, story-wise?
I loved it.
It was really cool. I loved it.
I found it a bit frustrating at first because I was playing it. I downloaded it on my laptop, not as the app on the phone.
I did the same.
I wasn't quite. There were times where I was like, okay, I've got to do this time. I'll like sit down and I'll play it for a bit, and then like I'd play it for like 5 minutes and then be like, bye, I'll see you in a couple of hours. I'm like, dude, like I won't be here in a couple of hours. But then when I got to like the third day, when he's in the peak and the aliens and everything's going to shit, it was like 9:30 at night. And I was like, I really need to start going to bed soon. No, I've got to be like,
going anywhere. Because I downloaded it on Steam as well, because I knew that if it's just another app on my phone, I feel like I'm going to just end up neglecting it like I do with my social media when I've ignored too many notifications.
Mood.
So I was like, if I put it on my laptop, it's there and it's popping up. I can't ignore it as easily, kind of, sort of. And that helped.
Well, I think with my busy schedule, and I think the first time I played it, I was in school, so I didn't have a whole lot of free time in that. I was just doing it at lunch and recess. It was really hard for me to get to get the hours right. So like to get the full experience of it, because it was like, okay, Taylor, I understand you're having a life and death crisis. That's great. I need to do my maths work now. Hold on. But like that
priorities, yeah.
That does kind of throw things off a little bit. But I think if it was like in the middle of quarantine, for example, and you're not doing anything for 3 months, that's when you can get the full experience of it, personally.
I think I first played it over like a weekend. So I had like so much free time at home, and I just had like my iPad, I think I played it on at the time. I just had that sitting next to me the whole day and just did everything else. And then when it came back, I just slid it over.
Because I did it like during the week at work, and my phone plays the music for our work, like our store at work. So like it's fine. But whenever I heard the notification sound, I was like, after this customer, I get to see what Taylor's up to. So then I'd like do a couple of things on my phone. So it's kind of like, it was kind of cool, because like working retail right now can be very tough. It's either very, very busy or very, very quiet. There's no in between. So in the quiet times, it's kind of cool because you've got a friend that you can talk to and be with in those times. And in the busy times, you've got something to look forward to, which is weird. But I think that's the function of the game, is it's meant to play on that relationship aspect. Because I definitely developed feelings. Is that the right word?
Emotional connection.
Definitely developed. Yeah, I did. And like whenever I killed her, I felt really bad.
I was really surprised how immersive they made this text-based game. It's literally just text that pops up on a screen. But the way they've written it is so clever that you can't help but care for them.
You know, it's very similar to The Martian, the book The Martian, because like the movie kind of changed it a little bit, but in the book itself, it's literally just kind of diary entries. So like you're hearing what he's thinking at the time. So we've lost Emily.
She's probably getting dinner.
It's all right. She'll be back.
Have you guys read The Martian, or is it just me?
I've only watched it.
Okay, so you know how in the movie, how he's like recording himself?
Yeah.
And like he's speaking to the camera. Imagine that, but written down. That's pretty much what the Martian book is like.
Yeah.
And I think it started off, it's one of like the most fascinating stories for me. Started off as literally just those entries on his blog, and that like it was one entry at a time. Some of them are only a couple words, some of them are a couple pages long, but because it was timed and all different, it kind of felt immersive as you're reading it. Whereas Taylor is sending you messages, like just one word, one sentence messages as it goes on. I think it has a very similar vibe. It may be the space thing. I don't know.
We're stuck on a planet. I think the reason it works so well is because it's personal and they've added a lot of background to their character, without specifically doing like full text-based, here's my history. You just learn as you go. Like when they're like, oh, this is a word that I learned the meaning of the other day. And you're like, oh, that's right. You were doing normal things.
You're a real person. What?
And I think like the writers were clearly so knowledgeable about genre and medium as well, because they were fully playing on the expectations of like sci-fi, alien, mystery. And like I loved whenever Taylor kind of mentioned, like as you were saying before with the horror movie bit, where he was like, I'm not going to go there because I've seen enough horror movies to know what's going to happen if I go there. And I just took a screenshot of this bit at the end where there's like a big computer system and she's trying to override it. And I said, can you override it? She goes, I don't know, I'd love to. But unlike in all those B-grade science fiction movies I love so much, there's no big red button with the words manual override stamped on it here. Computers to torrent some BBC shows or program little choose-your-own-adventure games in my spare time. But trying to hack into this thing and override a weapon system, like how it was so self-aware. It was such a joy to be part of that and to read it. Like I'd literally laughed out loud on several occasions. I'd screenshot bits and be like, Ashley, this is funny.
Can confirm.
And like, because as you were saying, Elly, like expectations from The Martian and like Alien and like playing on like Star Trek almost as well. Like it was really cool. I liked it.
You do kind of need a good knowledge of sci-fi things to really immerse yourself in it, I do think. But that works for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they played to the tropes, like they played to the strengths of them. They didn't just put them in. They made jokes about them. They still had them, but they worked. And I think it paid off really well for them.
One thing that I am kind of curious about, because I did feel like, because I did play several routes in which I murdered Taylor on multiple occasions, but I felt like
by accident, if any police are watching.
Yeah.
Ashley and Elly, who've played it a little bit more, like I still felt like the story was quite linear, and it like every kind of route I played was still working towards a very similar result. But how much of that kind of tree structure where you do get those different kind of results and where you explore, like is there a greater spectrum of results that you can get?
Elly, do you want to take it?
It's weird because I kind of think of it as more of like a vine rather than a tree. So you've got you do have your linear storytelling, but it's a particular choice that you make up here that may connect down there later on. So that's just how I think about it. Like it's not necessarily changing the story, but it changes different aspects of it. So I think if like you can get a medical kit earlier on, you can get the generator for like you can save the captain's life if you get the generator. Like it's particular choices that you can make that make a difference in the overall storyline, but ultimately it is pretty linear. So not necessarily a tree, but a vine. That's how I refer to it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. More of a vine than a tree. I purposely go through as many options as I can. Again, because that's the kind of player I am in any video game. Everyone who's seen me play can vouch this. I take a long time getting from point A to point B because I need to see everything. So when it comes to the choices where Taylor's like, should I go straight to here or should I go explore this place? And I'm like, you're going to go explore this place. And if you die, then that's fine. But we'll go back. But definitely you're trying to get to the peak. That's your goal, basically, which then initializes the end scene in multiple ways. But yeah.
Also, you can die before then as well. Many, many ways.
Many times.
Many ways.
Yeah.
I learned very early on, like, if you just don't let him sleep next to the reactor, it's like, oh, he might get, like, nuclear burns. He could
Did you
just
Google
die
it?
in the cold. Mhm.
I googled
Yep.
it.
I did that too.
I was like, let's find out. And I was like, oh, that was a lucky choice. Okay, cool.
See, that's something that I
That's the
remember from
logical
several years
choice.
ago.
No, that's radioactive. I'm not going to be there.
Yeah.
But
We
that's
find
very
a
interesting.
tent.
There are so many choices like that where you think the obvious answer is going to be the thing that makes them survive, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I knew the answer to it, but I still Google it every time.
But
Just
it was
in
funny
case.
on
Love the-
Google. The top answer is like, Lifeline, can you sleep next to
Yeah.
the radioactive thing?
Yep, top result.
Which is hilarious.
'Cause I love that
I
Taylor's the
didn't
type of
even put the
character
word
that asks
lifeline.
that.
I know.
Mm.
That's what I did, but it still came up. That was the top search, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
When you actually sleep next to the reactor, the green slime in the mouth, I wanted to talk to you guys about that very briefly because it was like, that was the alien trying to get into their body, but I don't understand how it wouldn't work then, but it worked later on.
Maybe
I
the
mean, if you're
radiation.
unconscious. Sorry?
The radiation?
Yeah.
Maybe.
You're just supposed to think that, like, at first, you're supposed to think that the green spit is something to do with the radiation because
You're like,
you
oh,
slept
gosh.
next to yeah. What am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Have I like killed you in advance? Like, what have I done?
I instantly thought that at some point Taylor was just going to have an alien moment. It's just going to come out of him. And I was like, oh no, I've already ruined him. Really just
Surely
got
there's
here.
got to be something like that. Surely there's got to be something in there. There are so many options.
Mhm.
Did you guys explore a
pretty
lot of the
sure.
options? Like after you'd finished playing through once, did you go back?
I'd like to later on, but yeah, I just don't really have time at the moment. But
Mm.
Also, I still had the Night Circus to read, so
yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
it's
pretty
only a
much.
little bit.
You have an excuse.
Yeah, I'm a bit biased there. I kind of want you to read the Night Circus just a little bit.
Just
Alright.
a little bit.
Final question for Lifeline before we switch over to Night Circus is, did you move on to play or are you intrigued to play any of the sequels or follow-up adventures?
I want to. I only found out
haven't,
about
but
them the other
yes.
day. Yeah.
Would you guys do it on the phone this time rather than on Steam?
I think I would.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Because I mean, I hate to
Did
say it, but
anyone else
I've
get
already
to-
got several.
The bit where, like, if you rescue Taylor, you then get this sort of little kind of sequel-y bit with a different captain of like a recon
I
ship.
got that.
Oh,
I
And
got that.
you got that? Yeah. And that's why I kept going back because I couldn't work out how to get her away. And then I Googled it and it turned out you can't.
Yeah.
oh.
So
It's dead in
Okay.
every version. I was just like, oh,
basically, yeah,
right.
if you wanted to keep going with Taylor, then you would go on to Silent Night, I think is what it's called. And
Okay.
that's on the
Yeah,
rescue ship. And then I haven't played Lifeline 2 all the way through yet, but I don't know if Elly has.
It's been a long time. I know I've played Lifeline more than I've played Lifeline 2, but I have finished Lifeline 2.
And Lifeline 2 is a
Okay.
Years
medieval
ago.
setting.
Yeah, it's sort of like
Oh, that's
it's
cool.
it's
Okay.
not really medieval, but it's definitely magic related.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's
Okay.
like modern magic. I mean, you're still on a phone, so
Mhm.
can't really make it
parchment.
medieval.
Parchment background.
No, it's aesthetically pleasing. That's what it is. Hang on, I'll see if I can get it up so you guys can have a look, just to have a preview. Wait, no, don't worry. It
Yeah,
has
like,
to re-download.
definitely interested in playing some more of this format. I think it's, as someone who, like,
Yeah.
my preference for any kind of storytelling is character-driven narrative, and this is 100% character-driven narrative. So I'd love to give it a go again. Whether it's this one again or
Mhm.
trying one of the different versions. Because I was looking at it on my phone, and there's like 12 different games that you can play or something like that.
There's heaps.
I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
go with Silent Night just because then you still have Taylor for a little bit.
Yeah, I like
Because
that.
we all love Taylor.
It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
I will say this, Lifeline 2, the character isn't anywhere near as sarcastic, which is not as fun.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, where's the fun in that then?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Night Circus time. Elly's
Alrighty.
favorite book.
It is my absolute favorite book of all time, so I must know, like, outside of all book club related things, did you guys actually enjoy it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still developing feelings.
I messaged Elly straight afterwards and was just because I finished it like at night. I was in bed And I was like, oh, Elly, this is what it feels like to love a book.
Oh.
Oh,
So I validated her.
that moment where she texted me, it was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night or something like that. It was just that moment that I've been waiting for 7 years. And that moment in Brooklyn Nine-Nine with like the balloon arch where he goes, vindication. That was everything that I felt in that moment. It was just... And then I went to work the next day and I literally told all my co-workers, I was like, my best friend loves my favorite book.
Oh.
Good book.
That's
And then
a win.
Bethany read it. And finished it this afternoon. She's like, it's all right.
I liked it. No, I liked it, but I had some major issues with a lot of like the progress of reading it. I understand now that I've read the last 100 pages why some of those decisions were made, but it doesn't stop you as the reader reading like 80% of the book. Anyway, we'll talk about more of that stuff in a sec.
You can keep going. It's all good.
So my biggest thing was like, I spoke to Elly about this. I think, as we mentioned before, I love a character-driven story. And so much of this, you can't have a character-driven plot in this because there are too many perspectives, too many characters that we're trying to get. I didn't count them all, but there's got to be over like 12 different characters, like narratives that we get through different chapters. And there's so many points in this where we were just told how to feel. And my biggest problem with it was the romance between Celia and Marco, where it's not really built up that much. We don't see them together developing feelings. They get together in like this weird orgasmy, energy, touchy scene, which I had problems with. And then it's just like they're just together. And then like, I don't know, it just told us like they have feelings for each other. They, want to be together. And like all of a sudden they go from like not wanting to be together because of this energy exchange to straight up having sex. And then they're like full on romanced. And that's the core of this is the core of the book, is this tension between these two characters.
Or Isabel as well.
I know, poor Isabel.
Thank you.
But that was my big thing.
That was rough.
There's so many different characters, and this is the core of the book. And obviously, like these guys read it differently to me, so they did feel some sort of connection to that. And the writing was beautiful. Like don't get me wrong, the writing was beautiful. And now, having finished the book, where we learned that it's from, what's his name?
Widget.
Widget,
yeah.
Like it's Widget telling the story. Like it makes sense.
I did love that.
It does make sense why she's chosen to write it in that way. But reading it, there's like, I didn't feel like it really led up to a climax either. And so it was just kind of hard to keep reading and being like, okay, so something's going to happen over halfway, like 50% mark. I was like, okay, so something's going to happen. And nothing happened. Like, that's what bothered me. So I had a lot of issues more with the actual structure of the book, but the writing, I cannot fault. That was absolutely beautiful.
It's on point.
Emotive writing. My issue was just with, but I'd be interested now to go back and read it again, and knowing the ending, see if I read into it differently, see if I get a more positive response from it.
I kept describing it to people because people saw me reading it at work and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to read that. Like, what's it like? And the phrase I kept using, I said, it's very heavy on atmosphere, light on plot.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's
which is it's fine if that's what you're going for.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions that I love the description of this book so much. It's always been the thing that stick with me, and because the description was so like detailed and extravagant, I had this very specific image in my head as to what the world looked like, and that image stuck with me for all these years. Now, a reminder, this is the second time that I have read the book, okay? I only read it once and I fell in love with it straight away. The second time I read the book, the images were exactly the same, honestly.
That's really
That's cool.
So I Well, that's like another thing is that like a friend of mine asked me when I was reading the book again, and I was telling her how much I loved it. She said, "Oh, what if they made a movie about it?" And what would you do if they made a movie? And I said, I would be insanely critical and not go and watch it because I have this image in my head and I cannot let anybody else touch that image.
Yeah.
It is
I don't feel
always
like it
gonna
could
that
be made
way.
into a movie. Like, I feel like they would because it's like a best-selling book, but I don't feel like they could elicit the same visual spectacle.
See, I made
And
the
that feeling
mistake
of
of
expectation.
reading this book during the production we were in, and like midway, like between scenes, we have time off. We're like, oh yeah, I'll read a few pages, which is very difficult to like immerse yourself while there's people screaming like right next to you and like drums on stage. So I was like, yeah, this is fine. But then once I had time on my own to actually get into like immerse myself more into it, it was a lot easier to get involved. But like there was definitely points where I was like, the description's really like powerful, but like get to the point sometimes of the plot as well.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that much detail was necessary for the book?
Yes, for the overall book, I think it definitely helped. Like it showed what it was going for with the book, if that makes sense. Like you knew that it wasn't going to be like super plot heavy, but like the descriptive language was like so beautiful and on point, and it made it really easy to immerse yourself into like the overall experience. Especially with the younger characters, I felt like especially with like Bailey and Poppet, it makes it a lot easier to feel like the enjoyment that they're feeling for the first time going into a circus. I think that makes it a lot more easier to enjoy it.
And I think because we as the audience, we have to relate to Bailey because we've not been to the circus before. But then exploring like all the different tents, like when we had the cloud maze and Widget's like scent bottles and stuff.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That was cool.
I really enjoyed those chapters, and I think it's because we have to relate to Bailey because that's who we are. We've not been to the circus and we're falling in love with the idea of this kind of quirky aesthetic like circus. But yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about the second person narratives coming in then? Because that was literally supposed to be you going through the circus. Like it's not necessarily you're seeing it from Bailey's perspective. This is now your perspective. You are the one going through the circus. How did you feel with those like interjections? How do you feel about those?
I really like them. At first I wasn't sure, but I liked the rhythm of them, and I liked how they broke up the different sections of the book. It was kind of like taking a step back from everything after a lot of things happened, and then put that in its place to just be like, okay, take a breath. You're just standing in the circus now. Everything's okay.
I was like, when I read that was the thing that got me hooked into the actual stories.
Yeah.
I was kind of disappointed when it was majority told in third person, like normal, because I just got so hooked on this idea of being the main character of the story. Like, I understand why it was done in that way. I just it would have been really cool to explore some of these, these tents and different experiences as the main character that was in it. Because like every time it happened was just like,
at the very end, I thought it was also Widget telling the story to the man in the grey suit as well. Like I thought that's what the perspective as well was. Along with us
that's what I
being,
took
like,
away from it.
Yeah. Because it was like the very first line. I was like, oh, that's the first line in the book. Huh. I was like, okay.
I love it when books do that. Bethany was saying how she wished there was a bit more in second person. Like I think second person is really hard to do well, like outside of
agreed.
Choose Your Own Adventure. And maybe the fact that it isn't used too much is what makes it good in this. Because I feel like this is one case where it's done right.
I did love the reveal of Poppet at the end. Was it second last or the last one? And how we're picturing Isabel because she's the only fortune teller we've been kind of told to be, and then she rolls out her stars, and I was like, oh, that's just so cool.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So imaginative and creative, and oh, it was so good.
That's one of the things I really love about the final act, especially like in that last second person section, which is like the epilogue almost, because you are watching it from nowadays. It actually gives you Bailey's email address, so you know exactly
Yeah,
what
that's
it
it.
is.
I love that.
But it's like,
I want
with-
an email.
I'm not sure. I think I might have a couple of years ago, but I never received a response. You might have to do it again. I don't know.
Ah.
We will try.
Look, it doesn't hurt to try, so go ahead. But one of the things that I really loved about that final section is that you got to see this new generation of people in the circus that's still going, like 100 years later. It's just, I loved seeing that, honestly, because it brings the circus into it's not just a story, it's now actually something tangible. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, well, actually, I really wanted to talk about the characters, but then Bethany moved on to the conversation very, very quickly. So I'm going to backspace a little bit. There are a lot of characters in this book. Bethany's made her opinion clear about how she felt there were too many. But when I was reading it the second time around, because I already knew who they were, I felt a much deeper connection to them. How did you guys feel about these characters, and were you drawn to any story in particular in those perspectives, or did you feel like someone wasn't necessary? Like, tell me, what are your thoughts?
I loved all of them. I liked it because it was like viewing a puzzle, because that's how I see people, is like they're a puzzle and you see different things. And so I love seeing the different insights from all of them and seeing like all the pieces at play and knowing a bit more than some characters, knowing less than some others. I really enjoyed that because I thought it was immersive and moved the story along. I got confused at the beginning between the man in the grey suit and the guy who runs the circus, and I don't know why. It just happened.
I did the same.
I was like, every time a name popped
Andresh
up,
and Alexander.
I was like, which one are you? I'll just wait for some dialogue.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
But yeah, I liked all the characters. I messaged Elly at one point because I was like, what age is Bailey meant to be at over past the 1900s? I'm confused.
And then I give the mathematical answer of, well, they were born here and then they were this old when this happened. So
For some reason, I kept reading him really young, and I'm like, he's not though. But it's like his childlike wonder to the circus. And yeah, other than that, I think I also just got confused between the years a little bit.
Yeah.
I knew it was important to jump around, but it took a lot to start reading and then be like, wait, what year are we in? What events have
You have
passed?
to really pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to jump back to the start a few times because I was like, wait, how old are they? And I was like, okay, they reveal Go's age in like chapter 2. And it's like, oh, he's 9. It's been 25 years. Okay, we're fine. We're good now. Like a lot of times.
A lot of maths in this book.
So at one point I was like, okay, 1900s, it's Bailey. 1800s, not Bailey yet. I think we're okay.
Well, Bailey's storyline doesn't really intersect with the main storyline until later on anyway, so.
Yeah.
But of course you didn't know that because you've only read it once, whereas if you read it the second time around, I'm just saying.
So I also didn't
I do
realize
think it is
Widget was an
different.
adult until like he was drinking wine with Alexander, and I was like, hang on a second. Okay.
Wait a minute.
Okay. That's either illegal
are
or
you?
I've got them. Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
Well, this is kind of unrelated. Alex he killed Tara, kind of, sort of, basically.
That's how I read it.
That's what I thought. And I feel like that was kind of sort of
that's
glossed
what I read
over,
it too.
or at least there weren't really any repercussions after hypnotizing someone and getting them to walk in front of a train. At least that was my perspective of it.
That's how I read it too.
Yeah, that's how I read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ashley?
Yeah, I didn't want to settle on anything in particular, but that was like my gut instinct was something like that. But like also like the hair was gone from the book, so
Yeah.
Because that's very
Anything.
interesting to me. That's very interesting to me that all of you had that instinct, whereas for me, Alexander was actually another one of my questions, but for me, in that moment, it wasn't Alexander there, it was Alexander talking to Hector, and that was what drew her there, because she like felt some sort of magic, and so she was drawn to that. That's how I read it, because I don't see... Bethany thought Alexander was a villain. She kept on saying that I see Alexander as a villain, and I'm sitting here
Because
going,
of Tara. That's why.
but it's like having read the final chapter now, because Bethany actually hadn't read the final chapter by the time I was leaving for work. So I didn't get to talk about this with anybody. And Alexander as a character, please let me rant about this. It has been 7 years. Let me just talk. Alexander as a character is completely and totally morally, physically, dynamically grey. There's nothing about him that makes him black or white. He is always grey. Even the black and white circus, he is always grey. He is never described. His physical description is never described. It is so vague as to what he is. Even when you finally learn some sort of idea as to how old he is, you don't know. You don't know. And that's why when Bethany was like, no, he's a villain, I'm like, is he though?
I didn't say that though. I was like, because we don't know anything about him. We just know that he kind of killed this girl. Like, that's what I meant to think. But
like, it wasn't proven. There was a lot of like...
Well, because they never mentioned it again.
I was confused at first. I didn't even know that I kind of was like, did she just get hit by a train? I was like, well, they didn't say, but they kind of said. And like 2 chapters later, funeral. Oh, okay. Yeah, she dead.
Yeah,
cool.
she
Cool.
dead.
Yeah. And
so then how did you how did you react to Herr Thiessen's death then?
Oh,
that was rough.
I was so cranky.
I love the way
pissed.
that chapter was written. Because
That was really well written.
Everything
It was
else.
a good chapter.
Amazing.
I think that was the point for me that I started getting invested in the actual story.
Yeah, same.
What was going on. But Herr Thiessen, for me, he was one of my favourite characters. I loved the way that he felt about the circus. I actually thought him and Celia kind of had a thing going on at one point. It was really invested in it because it made they had one more chapter of time together than Marco and Celia, so it made more sense.
That was when I first jumped back to see what age she was.
Thank you, Ashley. I just need to point out, thank you.
But
he's like 20 years older than her.
That was when I first jumped back to see what age she was, and I was like,
that's not abnormal.
I saw it as like a father-daughter relationship, or like an weird uncle-niece relationship.
To be fair, weird niece.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and his clockwork, like, that was such an integral part of the circus. Like, I don't know if it's just me, the way I read it, but I really projected him. He was a kind of fundamental part of this. And so, like, when they kind of just killed him off and it had no repercussions. And
it did for a couple chapters. Cecilia and Mark were kind of thrown out of place for a while.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like if you're going to kill off a character, it can't just kind of happen. It has to
definitely just happen.
Momentum and like change things. And I felt like the only thing it changed, the way that it was described, it was like because Isabel undid her charm, that was the reason that it happened. And then the only kind of consequence to it happening was that Celia and Marco finally got together. I don't know. I didn't like that was all. I didn't. He deserved better.
See, I thought he was a terrific character, but I thought it kind of set everything in motion from that.
It did. It did. But there was no consequence to his death. Like, choices that happened pursued it. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Because, like, what happened was, like, stuff happened because he died, but there was no grief. There was no...
Right.
Like, response to his death. The only kind of thing that, like, he died and they got together and then Celia got the book and, like, then things started kind of happening in the story, but we never got, like, a tribute to Frederick at the end. He died and then he gets referenced by the reviewers at the end with Bailey and then he gets a sign at the end. And I just... But that comes back to my point of view. I think there were too many characters. So there was nowhere to invest time into these characters' relationships because it was so much about moving things forward. And he was just one of the few that I really liked. So
I disagree, but we can have this conversation in person.
I mean, this is a book club. You are supposed to discuss the book club.
But that one will be a long discussion.
Screw it. Another Zoom meeting. That's fine. No.
It just
But it's
cuts
very
to all of us
interesting.
yelling.
No, go on, Ashley. Like, what do you disagree with?
I disagree about the fact that his death needed to be a big thing, because it didn't need to be, because they're trying to prove that he's not technically part of the circus. He has played a big role in the circus, but he's not physically connected to the circus. He's emotionally connected. So there's a couple chapters afterwards where they grieve, but they have to move forward because they're holding so much of the circus within themselves. They don't really have a chance to let go of it. That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
My short thoughts, my spark notes of thoughts.
No, I agree. But that's the thing, is it's like we should have been more. Why did it not have more of an influence if that was the case? If, Celia was so affected by his death, which she was, because we were literally told, we weren't shown, we were told by her dad that it's like, oh, this is the thing that's going to break her. And then, like, I don't know, it just kind of didn't. But it couldn't. So that's the thing that I have to make my peace with it, because that's how it was written.
7 years and people are trash talking my favorite book. No, it's all good. No, I do find it very interesting though, because I do think I came into this with a huge bias, but hearing different perspectives, and Ashley has a different thing with a game that she's playing that I recommended to her that she's not enjoying, but she's not enjoying it for very valid reasons that I would have had the same reasons if I had not played it for several years prior. So, yeah, I do find it very interesting having this discussion with people.
It's The Last of Us, guys. It's The Last of Us.
Oh, okay.
I will out myself here. It's fine.
But, like, so for all of my, like, trash talking, it's just, like, for, like, 80% of the book, it is just slow and it's not really moving anywhere, and it's just the same stuff happening over and over and over again until Frederick's death is that pinnacle point. And then things start happening. Characters make choices and they have consequences, and like it was a lot easier to read. Like I found I wanted to keep picking it up and finding out what happens.
I kind of want you to reread it once life has slowed down a bit, because there's been a lot going on and you've had a lot to deal with. So I feel like a book that had a lot of characters to juggle, you were like, this is not the time to read it.
I did have that. I did mention that to Bethany a couple times. I do kind of feel like this is the book that you need to sit down and savor. I mean, the first time I read it, it took me 3 weeks to read it in like my busiest reading period of my life, okay? Like I was reading like a book every 3 days and I had to sit down and read this one for 3 weeks. So I do think that does make a difference.
I won't be reaching for it again soon, is the only thing.
One thing that frustrated me was that for so long there was no explanation of the competition and what it was for and why, how they would win, and I mean, it would be fine if they had no contact with their, with Prospero and Thingy, and it was just they didn't know. But the guys who know everything are right there all the time, and I just found that really.
They're just looking like, you'll work it out. Like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's fine. Just keep going. Just keep doing what you're doing.
It's like, well, they're not doing anything. Yeah. They're just building tents.
I will say.
It was still really good, but, like, it was really frustrating.
I did like the consistency. Hector was a complete arsehole from the get-go, at least, from start to finish. I was like, good consistency, good stuff.
Yeah.
The character development is that he went from alive to sort of dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's the character development there.
Yep. That's like, well done.
And I did enjoy that little bit of exposition at the very end where we found out that he was actually a student of Alexander's. And it was their kind of classic, rivalry techniques of like that propelled these into motion. And it was one of those things where it was never intended to be a death competition, but it has kind of just spiraled over time and repeated competitions into that. Like, that was really cool. But that's in the last chapter of the book, like second last chapter of the book. Like,
I did really like the coming together of part 5. It was really well done.
Yeah, I agree. I did love the ending.
I will agree with you. I do think that this book does have pacing issues, and that is always what I say when I recommend this book to people. I do say, don't go in this expecting like this swashbuckling adventure like some people make it out to be, because it is not. It is really, really not. It's something that you need to, well, yeah, you do need to sit down and savor. I know I keep on saying this. But yeah, because the plot is very slow, and I kept on telling Bethany, just keep on getting to that end chapter, because that's going to explain where everybody is and what's happening and all that sort of thing. But I realized as I was saying it that is a very big flaw in the book, that you don't get it as you're reading it. So let me say that one thing. I'll say that. I'll put my hands up. It's fine.
Yeah, and for all of my like being really critical of there being too many characters, it was a very cool ensemble of characters. And if it was something where it was turned into like a mini series, I can see there being a lot of opportunity for the performers playing those characters to really bring nuance and complexity to those characters. But as like in the novel form, you can't get that history. And that was my big thing, that there was like so many people. And it just kind of, we never really got to know anyone in depth. And even if, like, the big thing for me was Marco and Celia, because they're the core of this book. They're the characters we see on the cover of the book. We should have had more time with them, understanding them and their ways of thinking, and not just kind of floating through, so I'm in a competition, I guess. I don't really know what to do, but that's my life. But I did like Celia's relationship, how she was kind of this parent. By the way, how did that happen? How was Celia the parent to Puppet and Widget, and not the parents? Like, where did the parents go?
It was not necessarily that she was the parent. It was more because they were young and everybody was busy in the circus and nobody was really expecting the performers to get knocked up. It was just more of the fact that it was like a babysitting duty, so they kind of took shifts. But the chapters that you're focusing on are the ones where she was with them, and because they felt the strongest connection to her, which I personally believe is because they were born with a sense of magic, and so was Celia. So, you go.
What were people's favorite tents?
What was it? Cloud Maze, probably, definitely.
Yeah, I was gonna say Cloud Maze, or maybe the ice one.
Oh, the
That's
ice one
my
was really
favorite.
cool. Yeah.
The
I
ice
love the
one,
ice tent.
the ice one, and Widget Storytime tent.
Yeah,
They're my favorite.
Widgets,
Mhm.
the wishing
Oh man,
Wishing
and I really
Tree,
liked.
yeah.
they were all really good.
The wishing tree was Marco, not Widget.
I also,
Okay.
and I actually did really like Celia's performance as well.
Would you guys go to a midnight dinner if you could,
Yes.
given your like sleep
Yes.
schedules?
I would be
was
the
like,
one
absolutely
I
hosting
yes.
don't think I'm interested
Yeah.
enough. Interesting enough.
If Chandra was hosting.
Oh, so like just scratching off any plans that we had for the Swell Publications midnight dinner, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I have.
Well, actually,
if you want to
yep.
go first, Elly.
no. Well, I was going to have this one be the last question. That's why.
Okay, I'll go down. There was one that Elly and I were discussing, which was, did you guys have a specific description in mind for the guy in the grey suit?
Not until he said very, very, very old in the last chapter, but otherwise, not really, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. It isn't even really. He's very nondescript in my head. Like when I try to recall what I imagined, there's not much there.
So same, like he wasn't described, but I pictured him as like a middle-aged black man. That's how I pictured him. And it wasn't kind of very clear until the end when he, and this is me projecting, it's not in the book anywhere, where he specifically picked Marco to be a competitor to Celia because him being in a competition, a life or death situation would have been better for him than growing up in orphanage foster care kind of thing. And so for me, I was like, he's got to know what that's like as someone who's kind of, it's the 1800s. I kind of pictured this gentleman who's come from slavery and this kind of history, but like way back as well. And there's like, that's
right.
people of color, like that's how I pictured him, just as someone who's kind of come through that. And it's still an issue, but he's gentlemanly and understanding of that. But I also pictured Marco as like an Indian boy. So there's no description.
Specifically Dev Patel.
Yeah, that's what we talked about this. So I pictured Dev Patel
Oh, really?
as Marco.
Okay.
I can
Um,
see that.
And so that was kind of part of it that
Yeah.
I was projecting on, that he was trying to take care of this kid in the only way he kind of knew how. But it's
I
not the
like that. That's real cute.
Yeah.
Fan casting is like a completely different conversation, and
Ooh.
I had this conversation with Bethany like weeks and weeks ago when she hadn't even finished, so I'm very interested to have this discussion now. My last question was, if the circus was in fact real and it did come to Australia, would you go and would you be a reveur? Two different questions, but I just want to know. Would you go?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
Depending on where it was and how.
Yeah. I don't think I'd travel for it.
Okay, so that was the second part, because a reveur is like you follow it around the world. Would you
I
dare?
would go to Sydney.
Yeah, right?
That's probably like it.
I think I
Yeah.
could afford to, yeah.
I think
But
I'd
that's the
have
thing.
to, yeah, I'd have to go first before I decided to
Hmm.
become obsessed.
Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, there are characters in the book, which is I really loved the chapter where Bailey was actually with the reveurs.
Oh, that was good.
Because he was actually taking the place of somebody who usually comes with them, but he just couldn't because he was busy. So that is also an option.
Maybe seem like a
If
nice
I was
group
a
of
I mean,
different
people.
maybe I'd
from
travel
rich people.
Australia.
Yeah, I think almost all of us would agree that we would go, absolutely, should we have the funds to be able to travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that was my final question, but I would just like to say thank
just
you
wanted
so
to-
much for indulging me, because, like I said, I've been waiting 7 years for somebody to read this book, and now I have 4 people who have read this book, and I love it. Right. So thank you,
Aw.
genuinely thank you, and I'm glad that you. I'm sure you all enjoyed it. You did mention that you enjoyed it, but I'm glad that it was a discussion, that it was not just like. Hell yeah, this is a great book. This is so good. This is so good. We all agree with everything. I do appreciate the fact that there was a little bit of distance there.
Awesome. Well, you guys already know because you're part of our Swell Book Club. But for anyone
Well.
who's watching in the land of YouTube, we will be doing Coraline as our October book for our book club, getting into those spooky vibes. Neil Gaiman is one of my personal favourite authors. His way of writing is just immaculate, and actually quite similar, I think, to Patrick Ness and Emily Morgenstern that we've kind of had in our past. I'm just going to share quickly, when I purchased this book from the bookstore, the girl was telling me about the history of how this book was published. So Neil Gaiman took it to his publisher, and she was like, as a kid's book, his intention was to publish as a kid's book. And she was like, oh, I don't know, this is a bit scary for kids. I don't know if that's appropriate. Maybe we'll have to market it more towards adults. So the publisher took it home to her daughter that night and was like, can you give this a read and tell me what you think? The daughter read it and was like, yeah, Mum, it's totally fine. No issues. Publish it for kids. Published it. And then years later, confessed to her mum, she was like, no, I was so scared after reading that book, but I knew if I told you, I wouldn't publish it and we couldn't share it with all the other children.
Oh,
Oh.
And I just think that's such a cool story. And so now I'm very excited to read the book and find out more.
In the beginning of that copy, he also explains that he was writing it for his oldest daughter at the beginning, and then he left it alone for a while, and then was like, I'm going to finish it for my youngest daughter.
Oh.
We'll probably discuss the movie, like comparing it a bit at some point. So if you're willing to rewatch it, it's one of my favorite movies, but if you're willing to rewatch it, go for it.
Yeah, all right. Sure.
I believe in you.
And it'll be a nice kind of refreshing for Ash and I, who are slow readers and struggling with it. It's a nice short read.
It's also
nice big font.
Yeah, it's meant to be for younger kids, like younger audience. So the writing isn't too complicated.
Wait.
Also, if you don't really feel like reading it, I have Dawn French reading the audiobook to me. So
Oh, yeah.
That's a good
Awesome.
choice.
I would have gotten the physical copy, but when you see Dawn French, you go, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So read it, come along next month. Anyone who's watching out there, feel free to join our Swell Book Club on our Facebook page. Make sure you subscribe down below. Leave any comments about what you thought about Lifeline or the Night Circus. We'd love to continue that discussion with you, whether it's in the comments here or over on the Swell Book Club. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
I just broke the spine of my book. That's fine. It's all good. It's fine. It's a notebook, so you know.
It now
All good.
matches your copy of the Night Circus.
This